Good morning. Grab your coffee, settle in, and take a look out the window. Today, we're not talking about the Fed. We're not talking about inflation. And we're definitely not talking about the latest tech IPO. We're looking at the sky and your bank account. Most of us think of our wealth as a series of numbers on a screen. It's in the cloud, right? It's safe, it's digital, it's invisible. But here's the deal. That cloud has a physical address. It lives in the ionosphere, a thin layer of our atmosphere that's currently getting hammered. Let that sink in for a second. The number you need to know today is 163. That's the smoothed sunspot number right now. It's a staggering 410% jump in just 3 years. Think about that. While we were all busy arguing about interest rates and AI, the sun decided to wake up, and when the sun wakes up, the digital world starts to tremble. We saw a hint of this back in May 2024 with that G5-class geomagnetic storm, the strongest since 2003. It wasn't just a pretty light show. It was a warning shot across the bow of our entire financial system. It was a test of the grid that many of us barely noticed, but the people who run the world certainly did. Now, I know what you're thinking. It's just space weather, right? We have satellites for that. Well, not so fast. Every time you tap your phone to pay for a latte, you're relying on a signal that has to travel through that vibrating, electrified atmosphere. We've built a $100 trillion global economy on the assumption that the sky will stay quiet, but the data says otherwise. The math is getting tricky, and when the math stops working, the cloud starts to look a lot more like a fog. The reality is that your digital wealth is physically tethered to an atmosphere currently being bombarded by the highest solar activity in 2 decades. It's a fascinating structural flaw in the skyscraper of modern finance. We've optimized for speed, we've optimized for convenience, but we've forgotten about the 93 million mile away elephant in the room. But how does a solar flare actually delete a mortgage or freeze a credit card? That's where the story takes a sharp turn into the mechanics of precision timing. And honestly, this is the part that blew me away when I first saw the data. Let's talk about the global heartbeat. It's something called PNT, positioning, navigation, and timing. Most of us just call it GPS and use it to find the nearest Starbucks. But for the global economy, it's the invisible glue. In the US alone, $1.2 trillion of economic activity depends on this system every single year. That's not a projection, that's the current dependency. If those satellites go quiet, the gears of commerce don't just slow down, they seize up. And here's the part you need to pay attention to. 80% of all US equity volume is now driven by high-frequency trading algorithms. Machines? These bots execute trades in nanoseconds. For that to work, every server in New York, London, and Tokyo has to agree on exactly what time it is down to the billionth of a second. They use GPS timestamps to stay in sync. But when a solar flare hits, it causes what scientists call ionospheric scintillation. Basically, the atmosphere becomes a blurred lens. The GPS signals drift. They don't disappear. They just get fuzzy. Only by a microsecond, maybe? To you and me, that's nothing. You won't even notice your map is off by a few feet. But to an HFT algorithm, that microsecond is an eternity. It's a glitch in the matrix. When those timestamps desynchronize, the trust layer of time dissolves. Imagine an algorithm trying to execute $1 million trade, but the log says the trade happened before the order was placed because of a timing drift. The system panics. We're talking about automated liquidity freezes, circuit breakers tripping not because the market is crashing, but because the machines can't agree on the sequence of reality. The global heartbeat skips a beat, and suddenly, the digital numbers in your pocket become inaccessible. ATM networks, credit card processors, and digital wallets lose their anchor in time.
I know, sounds like a sci-fi movie, but look at the data. We're seeing a 300% increase in the frequency of level 5 geomagnetic risks. The NASA and NOAA models for this solar cycle were far too conservative. We've already surpassed their peak projections. In this looming digital silence, a specific group of players is already moving their chips to a different table. They aren't waiting for the blackout to happen.
They're building a parallel world beneath our feet. Let's talk about the smart money and where it's actually hiding. If you follow the money, you'll find it's moving away from the sky and deep into the ground. Since 2024, there's been a massive 200% increase in government contracts for something called hardened communication backbones. While retail investors are busy buying the latest cloud software stocks, institutional giants are quietly buying up dark fiber. These are underground fiber optic cables that are physically shielded from the sun's reach. They don't rely on satellites, they don't care about the ionosphere. They are the new safe haven for the digital age. Think about companies like Lumen and legacy analog infrastructure providers. They own the old world, the wires, the landlines, the terrestrial cables. For a decade, they were seen as dinosaurs. But in a world of solar instability, they are the only ones with a protected heartbeat. The Faraday shielding market is also seeing explosive growth, valued at over $7.4 billion now. We're seeing top-tier investment banks installing shielded server racks that can withstand a geomagnetic pulse. They aren't just preparing for a bad day. They're preparing for a systemic shift in how we define reliability. There's an experts' war going on right now that most people are ignoring. On one side, you have the bulls like SpaceX, arguing that massive satellite constellations like Starlink can just reroute around ionospheric holes. On the other side, you have researchers like Dr. Sangeetha Abdujyothi from UC Irvine, who warns of an internet apocalypse. She points out that the long-distance undersea cables, the literal backbone of the global internet, rely on repeaters that are highly sensitive to the currents induced by solar storms. If those repeaters fry, the continents stop talking to each other. This isn't just a technical problem. It's a massive wealth transfer in the making. The players who own the hardened infrastructure will hold the keys to the kingdom when the satellite networks start deorbiting at a rate of 240 units per year. It's a pivot back to analog resilience. But is this a new threat, or are we just repeating a history we've chosen to forget? To understand the scale of what's coming, we have to look back at the last time the sun really showed us who's boss. And trust me, the comparison is sobering. Let's take a trip back to September 1859. The Carrington event. It's the gold standard for solar storms. Back then, the height of technology was the telegraph. When the storm hit, the sky turned blood red as far south as the Caribbean. Telegraph operators saw sparks flying off their machines. Some lines even worked without batteries, powered entirely by the celestial current pulsing through the wires. It was wild, it was beautiful, and for the telegraph companies, it was a mess. But their solution was simple. They just unplugged the batteries and waited for the sun to calm down. Here's where it gets strange and a little scary. We can't just unplug 2026. In 1859, a solar storm was a curiosity for scientists and a nuisance for telegraph offices. Today, we are a civilization built on microchips and high-voltage transformers. A Carrington-level event today, which Lloyd's of London estimates has a 92% similarity index to current solar patterns, wouldn't just cause sparks. It would induce massive currents in our power grids, literally melting the copper inside the massive transformers that keep our cities alive. And here is the data point that should keep you up at night. The global spare transformer inventory is less than 3% of total capacity. Let that sink in. These aren't like AA batteries you can pick up at the store. A single high-voltage transformer can weigh 400 tons and takes nearly 2 years to manufacture and deliver. If a major storm hits and fries even 10% of the grid, we aren't looking at a weekend without power. We're looking at a 4 to 10-year recovery time. That is the systemic heart attack the bears are warning about. In 1859, the economy didn't live inside the wires. Today, the wires are the economy. Your savings, your mortgage, your credit score, they are all just electrical charges sitting in a server somewhere. If the grid goes dark and stays dark, what happens to that digital trust? The sun doesn't care about your portfolio, but in 2026, your portfolio will definitely have to care about the sun. So when the peak hits, what's your move?
Because the smart money has already made theirs.
We've looked at the risk, the mechanism, and the history. Now let's talk about the roadmap. Because this isn't about fear, it's about strategic action. The sun is rising on a new economic era, and only those with their feet on the ground will keep their heads in the game. We are seeing a massive shift toward what I call resilient wealth. Look at the numbers. 62% of digital assets are now moving into cold storage. People are pulling their wealth off the grid and into air-gapped hardware wallets. They're choosing to be offline because in 2026, being always on is a liability. You need an analog backup for your digital life. It sounds old school, even primitive, but having physical records and hard assets is no longer optional. It's the only way to bridge the gap if the global heartbeat skips. We are seeing a new class of investors who are prioritizing sovereign resilience, the ability to function even when the network is dark. They're the ones buying the Faraday pouches for their phones and the ones keeping a percentage of their net worth in things the sun can't delete. It's about decoupling your survival from the stability of the ionosphere. The 2026 solar peak is a stress test. It's going to filter the cloud chasers from the ground builders. The math says the storm is coming. The data says the grid is thin. But the opportunity, that belongs to you if you're paying attention. You don't have to wait for the lights to flicker to start building your own Faraday cage for your finances. Think about that next time you look at your banking app. Are those numbers real, or are they just waiting for a solar flare to prove otherwise? The sun is a powerful reminder that our digital world is built on a very fragile physical foundation. But for the prepared, that fragility is just another market signal. Stay sharp. Keep your assets resilient. And remember, the sun doesn't care about your portfolio, but the person with the analog backup definitely does. I'll see you tomorrow morning. Don't forget to check the weather. The space weather, that is.